غلام اسمه يحيى لم نجعل له من قبل سميا قال رب أنى يكون لي غلام وكانت امرأتي عاقرا وقد بلغت من الكبر عتيا قال كذلك قال ربك هو علي هين وقد خلقتك من قبل ولم تك شيئا قال رب اجعل لي آية قال آيتك ألا تكلم الناس 3 ليال سويا فخرج على قومه من المحراب فأوحى إليهم أن سبحوا بكرة وعشيا يا يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة وآتيناه الحكم صبيا وحنانا من لدنا وزكاة وكان تقيا وبرا بوالديه ولم يكن جبارا عصيا وسلام عليه يوم ولد ويوم يموت ويوم يبعث حيا واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت من أهلها مكانا شرقيا فاتخذت من دونهم حجابا فأرسلنا إليها روحنا فتمثل لها بشرا سويا قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا قالت أنى يكون لي غلام ولم يمسسني بشر ولم أك بغيا قال كذلك قال ربك هو علي هين ولنجعله آية للناس ورحمة منا وكان أمرا مقضيا فحملته فانتبذت به مكانا قصيا فأجاءها المخاض إلى جذع النخلة قالت يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا فناداها من تحتها ألا تحزني قد جعل ربك تحتك سريا وهزي إليك بجذع النخلة تساقط عليك رطبا جنيا صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
Thank you very much, Sayyid Ali, for that beautiful recitation. May Allah bless you and your family. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to begin by extending my warmest salam and deepest condolences to the awaited savior of our time, Imam al-Mahdi. May God hasten his reappearance and make us amongst his loyal and devoted followers. My honorable and respected scholars, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to also extend my deepest condolences to each and every one of you here tonight as we have gathered to commemorate the departure of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also the departure of his honorable great-grandson, the 8th Imam of Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before we begin the program tonight, first of all, thank you so much for being here with us tonight on the first of the second night of the program. I have a couple announcements to make before we begin the program. So, as mentioned last week, December 23rd to January 6th, we have the Ziyarah trip that is led by the Honorable Imam of the Center, Sayyid Mustafa Al-Qazwini. And you'll be going to the ziyarat of all the holy places in Iraq, in Iran as well. November 2nd, Saturday, please mark your calendars. This is mainly for the youth ages 15 and above. There will be a bonfire in Huntington Beach. It will be a potluck. There will be fun activities as well, group discussion. Specifically, it will be in the Newland Picnic Area A. I'm sure we will be sending out an email also with the directions and how you can get there in the coming days as well. So that's 4 to 8 p.m. in Huntington Beach. The other announcement I'd like to make, as I mentioned, this is the first night, so tomorrow will be our second and final night of the Wafatun Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam program, and it will also start at 7 p.m. sharp. November 9th, which is a Saturday, we will be celebrating the Milad of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and that will be the traditional inter and intra-faith program here at IECOC. So please, we would love to see you there. Lastly, as mentioned in the last couple of weeks, we are doing a food drive for the homeless of Orange County. With the Ahlul Bayt initiative, we'll be preparing warm meals and handing them out to the homeless, mainly in the Orange County area. So we would greatly appreciate it. If you would like to get involved or would like to learn more information, please welcome to talk to me. I'd be happy to provide you with more information as to how you can help. Or if you would like to make a generous donation, we would be happily accepting that as well. Without further ado, please help me welcome the Honorable Sayyid Mahdi Al-Ghazwini to the podium with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. قال الله في كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولئك الذين يعلم الله ما في قلوبهم فأعرض عنهم وعظهم وقل لهم في أنفسهم قولا بليغا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Part of the Quranic directive to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from God is the specifics of how to address the community, how to communicate with those that he came in contact with. And yesterday I mentioned that a great sign of the Prophet's leadership was his ability to communicate a message in a way that was clear, in a way that was understood, in a way that didn't really go above people's heads. And that's an affirmation to the verse in the Quran, chapter 14, verse 4, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. That we have not sent any messenger except in the language of his people. Not just language meaning, Arabic, English, but their style of communication, their way of thinking which comes across in the language, their way of logic and their way of deduction. And there are examples of that in the Quran, as we find in the case of the Prophet Nuh, where when he tried to communicate the fallacy of his people's belief, he began on their level, saying that in the same way you worship the moon, I worship the moon, but then the sun comes out and the sun is greater than the moon, so I choose to worship the sun. It was at their level. So God tells the Prophet not just what to communicate, but how to communicate as well, and why to communicate those specific things. Why does he have to communicate in a certain matter? There's a fable that's told about a king who one day sees a dream, and he's bothered by the dream, and so he asks his people to summon dream interpreters. And the correct interpretation of the dream was that him and everyone in his family were going to die. So he summoned a dream interpreter, and wanting to be truthful, he said the meaning of this dream is that you and your entire family are going to be slaughtered. You're going to be killed. And you're going to see it happen in front of you. So obviously the king was bothered by this, so, off with his head. And he brought another one. Now the second one wanted to be truthful, but he saw the lesson play out in front of him. So he chose not what to convey, but how to convey it, very specifically. He said the interpretation of the dream is that you will outlive all of your family members. He just found a different way to say it, and he was rewarded. But it was really the same message. So part of that communication that God is teaching the Prophet is not just what to say. It's not just teach them that there is one God. But how are you communicating that message? And why are you communicating in that specific way? So one of those verses is in chapter 4. It's in chapter 4, verse 63. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُ اللَّهُ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُم. God is speaking about a group of non-believers here. And God is telling the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, we know what is in their hearts. So because we know what is in their hearts, and they're hiding what's in their hearts, this is the way that you communicate with them. فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ وَعِظْهُمْ وَقُلْ لَهُمْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ قَوْلًا بَلِيغًا. And one of the contemporary experts on the Quran, he says the following. He says that since the Quran came to change people's beliefs, that was the message of the Quran, to challenge and change the people's beliefs, it was not sufficient just to argue rationally with them. This is why the Quran says, قُلْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ قَوْلًا بَلِيغًا, which translates into speak to them about their souls with penetrating words. Speak to their souls, not speak to their brains, not necessarily rationalize with them. Because people's behavior changes not because of the rational part of our brain, but because of the emotional part of our brain. When you look at the human brain from a biological perspective, it makes up, there's different parts that make up the brain, and different parts of the brain are responsible for different faculties of our behavior. So you have, for instance, they talk about the amygdala, which part of what the amygdala does is it manages our fear. And fear sometimes is healthy, because fear sometimes keeps you away from situations that are really dangerous. Now the problem is that the brain can't really tell the difference between something that truly needs to be feared sometimes and what should not be feared. And so sometimes people fear something which is not really meant to be feared. And they've conducted experiments where they go in with a needle in the head of a mouse, and they affect that part of the brain, the amygdala, and then they find that the behavior changes. So the mouse no longer fears a dangerous situation. So fear sometimes is important, because if it's not for fear, then what would hold you back from running across the train tracks or in the middle of the highway? But fear can also work against you. So if you look at the brain and you look at where behavior comes from the inner part of our brain, the inner limbic system. Then you have the external, the outer layer of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and all of that, and that's responsible for language and for rationalization. Well, what scholars of evolution say is that we've had our lower part of our brain, our emotional part of our brain, longer than we've had the rational part of our brain. So for most of our evolutionary history, what has driven human behavior is not the analyzation of things, it's not the rational side of things, it's the emotional side of things. And that's why they say that sometimes, if you're in a situation where, say, you want to purchase a car, or you want to purchase a house, and you have all the facts in front of you, you have all the numbers, you have all the benefits, there's all of the what and the how, but there's no why which is being conveyed to you. You say, you know what, I can't describe it, but I have a gut feeling. And the reason you can't describe it is because the part of your brain that is making that decision is not the part of your brain that's responsible for language. It's a different side of the brain. So sometimes you can have all of the facts. If you've ever been in the situation where you're at the dealership, you have all the facts, you want to buy the car, but it just doesn't feel right. That's another part of your brain making the decision. It's not the rational side of your brain, it's the emotional side of the brain. And so what the Quran is, what God is telling the Prophet in the Quran is that you think that sometimes you can sway people's opinion with the facts and with information, but with some of these people, it's not, the facts and information is not enough. That's why you have to speak to their souls. وَقُلْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. You have to appeal to their emotions and their inner part. وَقُلْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ قَوْلًا بَلِيغًا. Meaning speak to them in a way that is so persuasive that it penetrates their souls. It penetrates the part of the brain. And you know, it's funny because sometimes people say that, you know, you lead with your heart. Well, your heart doesn't make any decisions. Your brain makes the decisions. But it's a specific part of disbelief. And so their intention, what they said is, we have good intentions. Because a lot of us, we live outside of Medina, and we're not able to travel the distance inside of Medina. We don't have the means in order to travel the distance and come to the mosque of the Prophet. So we're going to build something which is outside. And if you read the narrations, it says that this was the plan of a man by the name of Abu Amr al-Rahib. And this was a man who was a Hanif. He was a monotheist. He was not a polytheist. He was not an idol worshipper. But when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he arrived to Medina, this man was uncomfortable because he saw that the Prophet was rising in popularity. He was gaining followers. He was, gaining a following. His influence was spreading. And so sometimes that happens. When you begin to gain influence, when you begin to rise, that, it's the ego. And the ego is a very small voice within us, but it's very tyrannical. And God forbid the ego takes over. Some people, when they see you begin to become successful and start to move forward, their ego tells them to be jealous, to be spiteful, to be vengeful, to attempt to take a shot at you. And so this was that type of man, and he was the uncle of Abdullah ibn Ubay. If you're familiar with that name, Abdullah ibn Ubay was one of the most influential hypocrites in the community in Medina. He was the one that's described in the Quran in Surah Al-Munafiqun, chapter number 63. يَقُولُونَ لَإِنْ رَجَعْنَا إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ لَيُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلِ, which was revealed during the Battle of Ben al-Mustalaq, an expedition that the Prophet took with a number of his companions. And these were the people that stood on the outskirts of Medina and said, you know what, as soon as this man comes back, referring to the Prophet, that we would eliminate him. We'd take advantage of the situation. Al-a'azzu minha al-adal. And the way that they refer to themselves is that the mightier of us, meaning us, the strong ones of us, we will banish the weak ones, meaning the Prophet and his followers. And God says, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. In reality, when you talk about izzah, when you talk about might and glory and honor, that belongs to God, His Prophet, and the believers. But the hypocrites do not know. They perceive power to belong to them. And so this man's uncle, Abu Amr al-Rahib, was the one who suggested that they build a masjid outside of Medina. And their excuse was that, it's too far and our intentions are very well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُ اللَّهُ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ وَعِظْهُمْ. That, Ya Rasulullah, you may not know about the intentions that they had. And they invited the Prophet to come and pray in the masjid, to bless it. But in reality, their intentions were evil. And some people, for whatever reason, they do things out of spite. No matter what you do, they won't be accepting of it. Sometimes, unfortunately, even organizations are founded upon spite. Islamic organizations, sometimes. It's very sad to see this. That no matter what happens, they try to create division. They try to create disunity. And this is something which is really centuries old. I mean, if you look at the story of Ashabul Fil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them in their Quran, and how Abraha had built this majestic cathedral in present-day Sana'a in Yemen in order to compete with the house of God in Mecca. And when he saw that people were not responding to him, he marched upon Mecca with an army of elephants seeking to destroy the Kaaba. Spite. There's a proverb. It says that, and this is a little bit, on a tangent, but I think it's related. is that the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Sometimes, and this tells us, honestly, this tells us a lot about child psychology and how those formative years are so important, and when children do not get what they need from their parents and from society, how that affects them at an older age. You know, we were just talking about our last Quran session about this. The topic came up, and a lot of you are familiar with the movie Joker that came out. And it reveals a lot, and if you're into that scene, you'd know that if you saw the movie The Dark Knight a few years ago, how they were describing this guy who just wants the world to burn down. And that when he takes what he wants, at the end of the movie you see a scene where there's a pile of money from the floor to the ceiling, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars, and what does he do? If you haven't seen the movie, it's okay. I mean, it's 10 years old, so you can spoil it after 10 years. What does he do to the pile of money? He just burns it. And what they were trying to convey, and they use this statement, they say that some people, they just want to watch the world burn out of spite. And then, if you've seen the recent movie, I'm not going to spoil that one for you, but you realize where that spite comes from, because, they explore his childhood and before he goes into Arkham Asylum, for those of you who are familiar with these terms. But sometimes it's because, we tend to think that this person's just a hater or whatever. No. Go back and realize that everyone has something within them that's driving their behavior. So when you see someone misbehaving, when you see someone acting out of spite or out of rage or out of jealousy, you can't figure out what people are going through. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet. That some people, you just have to let them go. You just have to turn away from them. It's not your message and it's not your mission to figure out what's going on inside these people's heads. So sometimes, and it's out of control, that we want to try to figure out what's going on. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the Prophet? How to treat these people? He says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُ اللَّهُ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. So those people who are saying that we built this masjid with good intentions, God is saying we know exactly what their intentions are. He says, do the following, do 3 things. This is what you should do, Ya Rasulullah. Number 1, فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. Turn away from them. And what commentators have said is this means one of 2 things. Either number 1, refuse to accept their excuses. Their excuse was that we've built this masjid, which in reality was built in order to cause harm and division. God says don't accept those excuses. All of us have excuses for why we do things. We tend to judge ourselves based on our intentions and other people off of their actions. And so that's why we're always looking at ourselves in a positive light and everyone else in a negative light. Because the gap between intention and action, everybody has good intentions. Everybody wants to be a good person. Everybody intends to, live a wholesome life and not hurt anyone. But what happens? There's a gap between intention and action. And it's part of that primitive brain of ours to put up walls and put up excuses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't accept their excuses, turn away from them. Or commentators say that another meaning behind this verse is that avoid openly punishing them. Don't do that openly. There's a law that says if you have to criticize someone, criticize them in private and praise them in public. In criticism and praise. The second is wa'idhum. The word wa'idhum comes from maw'idha, meaning to admonish them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُدْعُ إِلَى سَبِيلِ رَبِّكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ. In your persuasion, see there's a science and an art behind persuasion. And some people, unintentionally, because they don't know better, their idea of persuasion is to put people down is to insult them. He says, don't put them down and don't insult them. However, admonish them. وَعِظْهُمْ. And the third, وَقُلْ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ قَوْلًا بَلِيغًا. Speak to their souls. Speak to their emotion. Speak to what truly drives their behavior. And if you read the stories of people throughout history from the time of the Prophet and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the people who transition over, or the people who decided to change their behavior or their way, it wasn't because of the facts. It wasn't because of information. It wasn't because of rationalization or anything like that. It was how they felt. There's a narration that describes to us the reason why Zayd ibn Haritha, who was the adopted son of the Prophet, decided to stay as his, stay in his household. Zayd was a man who, at a young age, was brought to Mecca with his family because him and his family were looking for a lost family member. And he happened to simply stay behind. He was captured, he was brought to Mecca, and somehow he found himself in the home of Rasulullah. So many years later, his family, his father and his uncle, they came back. They came back. They heard that he was in Mecca, so they came back to retrieve him. And they found him in the home of Rasulullah. And so, they came to Rasulullah and they said, this is our son. He's a free man. He wasn't intended to be a servant. So the Prophet, he had no idea about that. Zayd himself was a very young boy, so, he didn't even recollect the fact that he was a free man. He only knew servanthood. And so the Prophet turns to Zayd. He says, look, Zayd, you've been in my home as a servant, as a loyal servant, but this is your father and this is your uncle. And you are a free man if you decide to go back to them. You're a free man. You don't have to be in my household anymore. So he decides to stay. And so the father and the uncle kind of look confused. And they say, you can be a free man and you can come back to your home, your place of origin. You would rather stay as a servant in the home of a foreign man in a foreign land rather than be a free man with your family and go back to your origin and your heritage and where you came from? And so Zayd says, look, maybe those are the facts, but you have no idea what this man has done in my life. And there is no way that I will ever abandon this man because of what he has done and how he has influenced me in that way. So he decides to stay in the home of Rasulullah, and at that moment, Rasulullah tells him that you are free. You're free to go. And even with his freedom, he decides to stay. It wasn't the facts and where he came from and all of that. It was how he felt because of how Rasulullah treated him like his own son. So when you're talking to people, are you making them feel comfortable in your style of persuasion? Or are you coming at them with all these facts and knowledge and information? There's a beautiful hadith, and I'll end with this. And this is a hadith where Imam Ali alayhi salam describes what the Prophet was and how he dealt with people. He says the following. He says, the Prophet was like a roaming physician who had set ready his ointments and heated his instruments. Back in the day, before there was the ER, where you'd have to go and stand in line for an hour or two, and they still have this in some countries where they have a traveling physician, where the physician will come to your door and make a house call. I don't know if that's a thing here, but in other countries it's still practiced. He says the Prophet was like a roaming physician. Now the Prophet wasn't truly a physician in that sense. But he says he had his ointments ready and he had heated his instruments. He used them wherever the need arose for curing blind hearts, deaf ears, and dumb tongues. Summun bukmun umyun. That's how the Quran describes the non-believers. That was his medicine. That was the type of remedy that he provided for people. He followed with his medicines the spots of negligence and places of perplexity. This is the description of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then he says they, the people that he went to cure those deaf ears and whatnot, they did not take light from the lights of his wisdom, nor did they produce flame from the flint of his sparkling knowledge. So the knowledge can be there, but if you have no desire to attain that knowledge, then it doesn't make a lick of difference. It doesn't matter. So the majority of people, how Amir al-Mu'mineen is describing is, the Prophet had the best medicine, but if you're not in need for that medicine, if you don't see yourself in need for medicine, then it doesn't matter how high quality the medicine is. You're just not in need. So in this matter, they are like grazing cattle and hard stones. You know, a cattle just sort of grazes and it follows wherever it's pushed towards. And a hard stone is something that nothing can penetrate. So some people, their hearts are like hard stones. But regardless, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he loved and he cared for everyone, whether they were a follower or a foe and an enemy. That's just the type of person that he was. And during those final days, Ibn Abbas narrates what is known as the calamity of Thursday, where the Prophet had become so sick that he would fall in and out of consciousness. And his most beloved people had come by his side, and there were a number of other people as well. And the Prophet says in a famous narration, "Bring to me instruments, something that I can write with and something that I can write on, so that I will write something for you that if you follow, you will never go astray after me again." And there was a division in the camp. And one side said, "Let's bring it for Rasulullah." The other side said, "No, do not bring it." Because they knew what the Prophet would write down and what he would instruct. And so the debate and the division became so heated that Rasulullah himself, even though he was in a state of weakness, he said, "Qumu anni." Leave, depart, go. It is not proper for you to debate in front of the Messenger of God and to fight and create divisiveness in front of the Messenger of God. And so they left. The narration says that many years later, and you know, it sounds very simple, but Ibn Abbas, when he would narrate the hadith many years later, he would weep until his beard was drenched in his tears. Obviously that had a very profound effect, to see someone turn away from Rasulullah and to insinuate that Rasulullah was not in his right mind, that he was hallucinating. And these were the people that he fought for and that he stood up for. And during those final moments, one narration tells us that as he was taking his final breaths, and that event happened on a Thursday, and it was on a Monday, which was the 28th of Safar when Rasulullah passed away, that Malik al-Maut came to him, the angel of death. The same angel of death that visits, no one is exempt. The same angel of death that visited all of the prophets before him and visits every human being after him. The angel of death came to him, and as he began, one narration says that as he began to extract the soul of Rasulullah, he felt a pinch, he felt a small amount of pain. And the Prophet tells him, he says that, "Is this pain normal? Is this what everybody feels? Is this what everybody experiences?" And the angel of death tells the Prophet that what you are feeling, O Messenger of God, is just a tiny amount, just a taste of what everyone, just a little appetizer of what everybody else, the pain that everybody feels at the time that their souls are extracted from their bodies. And in those final moments, and this was a sign of his care and his love and his compassion, he said, then in that case, he says, I want you to take away the pain from my ummah. I want you to take away the pain from my people, and I want you to put that pain on my shoulders. I will bear the pain on their behalf. I will do it on their behalf. So this is the Rasulullah that was sent as a gift to humanity, a gift to mankind. And what happened after Rasulullah? the real oppression began after his martyrdom, after he closed his eyes and after he took his breath for that final time. What would transpire and what would happen to his Ahlul Bayt after that, that was the real tragedy. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite us with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our deeds in these holy months. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, our a'mal, and to bring peace to all of those worldwide who are in need. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.